Hello and welcome. You're listening to Village Mama, a podcast that inspires us moms to pause in the midst of our busyness, to connect with each other, and to know that we are not alone on this parenting journey. My name is Charlex, and I'm a transformation coach and mom of two, and I create e-courses for busy moms to help guide them on their journey of self-discovery. Each week, I'm sitting down with moms to talk about their journey of parenting and the lessons that they have learned. I want you to consider this your community. I want you to consider us your tribe. Come on in and relax a bit because you are always welcomed in the Village Mama. Hello, Marta, and welcome. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Hi, Char. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm a triplet mom. I'm also originally from Brazil. I've been a teacher my whole life. I started teaching English to my friends in high school when I was 14 years old. So I have a long history of mentoring, encouraging. I also grew up in a Christian home. My mom's a pastor. So that's been a huge part of my life as well, especially with the encouraging and mentoring part of it. And I got my bachelor's in translation and interpretation. That's another huge part of my life. I've been interpreting and translating for preachers and speakers for a long time in Brazil. And then I got married, moved to the US, and got my master's in linguistics. So I'm all about the languages and cultures and connecting with people. And after having triplets, I actually started my own coaching business. It first started out with fitness and nutrition because that's something that I've always been passionate about. And it had the encouragement portion of, encouraging moms to live a healthier lifestyle. And recently, I would say in the last year, I've changed my focus into coaching mompreneurs with, the mindset and empowering them and things like that. So it's kind of like a mixture of several things, but always with the focus on empowerment and encouragement.
That's awesome. I know Martha. Martha's like amazing, right?
Aww.
So bubbly and just like effervescent. I love her. So it's interesting because it must have been a little bit of a culture shock moving from Brazil to America, right? Mm-hmm. And so what was that transition like for you?
So it's interesting because I'd always been fascinated with American culture, and I was actually made fun of by my friends in Brazil because they're like, you're not patriotic, what's going on? And it was just, this love for the English language and for the culture. And I feel like moving here wasn't that big of a shock, especially when I compare it to other Brazilians that have moved. But obviously it was a shock, especially in the sense of Brazilian culture. We're very close to our families. And here in the US, people are used to, leaving the home at 16, 17. They move away to go to college. That's really not how it works in Brazil. You pretty much live with your parents until you get married. And if you don't get married, chances are you're going to be living with your parents pretty much your entire life. And it's just such a different culture, this whole attachment. So being away from my family was tough. And also living with a man, because I have a sister and that's it, an older sister. And so I had never been that close to like boys and things like that. So it was a huge adjustment in that sense, like the cultural and just, being on my own kind of. I'd never experienced that because usually people live on their own first and then they get married. For me, it was like I left my parents' house and I went to live with somebody else in marriage, So I think it was lots of adjustments at once. I had the advantage of already knowing the culture, so I think that helped me a lot in knowing the language because I know lots of people, lots of Brazilians that move up here, they struggle because they can't really communicate, they don't understand. And I moved up here and started my master's right away. So it was good in that aspect because it's like I was learning so many things at once. I was like completely immersed in the culture in so many ways. And I think that helped me a lot because I know lots of Brazilians that have lived here for years and to this day still watch Brazilian TV. It's like they're still living back down there. And I was ready to kind of like not let go of my past, but just like live where I was, you know what I mean? And I think that helped me a lot. But yes, I had several challenges, cultural challenges in that sense of feeling like people are not as warm and welcoming, just different cultural differences in that sense, but always weighing in like the advantages and disadvantages to everything.
Yeah. And totally, you have to do that, right? Like my background is Antiguan. And so it's that same idea that it's very different culture between Antigua and Canada. And I remember when my grandma came here when I was little, she had a hard time adjusting, because she's used to everybody saying good morning to each other. Like when they saw each other first thing in the day and they're walking to work, good morning, Mrs. So-and-so, good morning, Mr. So-and-so. And so here she was trying to do the same thing. And nobody would say good morning back to her. Right. And so she felt like it was colder than she was used to,
Yeah.
And she wasn't talking about the weather.
Right. Yeah. No, people are definitely different, but I've learned to embrace that in a sense of like respecting personal space. Like there are differences in that sense that I feel like Brazilian culture lacks in a sense. So it is different, but I've learned to appreciate those differences as well. Even though it's like, it was hard at first. I love it now. And I actually went back and lived in Brazil for 3 years after moving here. And then we came back in 2016, and I don't really see myself living in Brazil anymore. Even though I love my family and, visiting and things like that, I have really embraced American culture. Like, I think I am like half American somehow for some reasons. I don't know.
But it's good, right? Because then you can actually share with your kids a little bit of both cultures, right? Yeah. And I think that when you come from a different culture, it gives you the opportunity to really straddle two different worlds and help your kids to see how they can kind of navigate this bridge between two worlds.
Definitely. I love that. And especially for them growing up bilingual, that's something that I really wanted to do. And it's funny because like we always resort to our native language in like critical times, and especially, with raising a child. Even when I got our dogs, when I was living here, it's like this natural instinct of just using your mother tongue to speak to them. And I've been enjoying seeing them grow. They're 2.5 now, seeing them mix the two languages. And I know it's going to change as they grow. I hear from a lot of other bilingual moms that eventually they decide they don't want to speak the one language, and things like that. But I want to make it a point to show these things to them and to make sure they're exposed to it, because I know it can only make your life richer and fuller experiencing these different worlds, right?
Exactly. So you have triplets.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, girl. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's interesting because one of my podcast episodes, I actually kind of went off talking about what it's like to have triplets, because that's something that people ask a lot. And the short answer really is it's a lot of work, obviously, but it's also a lot of fun. It's, it's really like not containing all the love that you have. You have all the worry, triplified, but you also have like my heart is full constantly. And especially now in this phase of them learning how to talk and showing their personalities and becoming little people, it's been really fascinating to see how, they're different from each other, but they're born the same day, and the bond that they have with each other. Like I have all these challenges. Obviously my day is very busy. I'm exhausted by the end of the day usually, but it's a really rich experience. Like it's very intense. And it's funny because I've always been an intense person. Like I like experiencing things. I'm not the type of person that just sits there and wants to relax. I do like doing that, but I feel like the more things I see, the more things I learn, the more things I do, the more fulfilled I'm going to be. And so having triplets really matched that in a sense, like, you want intense? I'll give you intense. It's like God told me, And so it really is, but it's just so rich, like it's intense. I don't know. It's really hard to explain, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, and it's helped me grow in areas that were lacking in my life, like being more organized and being more punctual. Like I noticed that they have helped me in those sense of, because I have to be, like obviously with having one kid, you have to as well. But with the 3, it's like it takes it to another level. And so it's helped me improve in areas that I needed to improve as a person. So
That's amazing. And so you have 2 boys and a girl.
that's right.
And remind me, one of your boys does have health challenges.
Yes.
So do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes. So that's another thing too, that I always try to look, for the silver lining in every experience of my life. And, one of the biggest challenges was realizing I was having triplets and having to accept that reality, especially when you're still pregnant, and like accepting, breastfeeding is going to be even more of a challenge. Delivery is going to be even more of a challenge. The pregnancy itself is going to be a more of a challenge. So adjusting to that reality. And then obviously they had to stay in NICU. So that was another challenge as well. And then Samuel, who is the child that has lung condition, he actually developed this lung condition after 3 months. Like he was 3 months old, and he was actually the healthiest at birth. He didn't really need any kind of breathing assistance as opposed to the other 2 that did. He was the biggest, he was the healthiest. He could have gone home sooner. We just decided that we were all going to take all 3 together. And then, so it was a huge surprise. I started noticing his breathing was, fast paced, and he didn't show any symptoms. And it took, I would say, almost 3 months of in and out of the hospital, being admitted and coming home. And I mean, can you imagine the stress with having the other 2 at home? And my husband would stay in the hospital with him. I would go visit, I would go pump so that he would have some of my milk there too. It was very intense again. It was a lot of like, why, right? Why triplets? And then why does one have to have this lung condition? And eventually I learned to, again, find the silver lining in that situation, because his lung condition is actually an infancy lung condition. It's something that eventually kids grow out of. It's really different for everybody, but basically some areas of his lungs are not fully developed yet. And it has nothing to do with prematurity. It has nothing to do with being a multiple. It's really like, it's a fairly new diagnosis out there. And that's why it took so long for him to be diagnosed, because they didn't really know what was wrong with him. It's kind of like a rare condition, I guess you could say. And then eventually we realized he needed to be on oxygen 24/7. And that was another thing that was hard to accept. Like, maybe he doesn't have to, maybe he can get away with this. Like, it's like, of course I want the best for him, but it's so hard to accept. Like, yes, that's what he needs. He needs this medicine, and the medicine is being on oxygen 24/7. And now as he grows and he's still on oxygen, he's decreased the flow, but he's, gaining weight and all of that. But I can see how he's just a regular child, a normal child. I know normal is not, the best word to use, but if you see his pictures, you might be like, oh, poor thing. When you see him running around with his brother and sister, and it's like, you would never imagine that he would be like that. Like, there's nothing different about him except for the fact that he breathes faster and he has to have that thing on his nose the entire time. Other than that, and it makes me really happy to see that he's growing and developing into a person and showing his personality and all of that, in spite of all of these challenges that he's faced, like with being away from me for months, in and out of the hospital and all of that. Like, it definitely was a challenge, but it was like another growth experience for me too, and for him as well. I mean, he's just such a strong little boy. It makes me a little bit emotional because it was a hard time. It was tough.
And there's so many moms out there who are trying to navigate the system, trying to advocate for their kids and their kids' health.
Yeah.
And even hearing you share your story is helpful to them. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, definitely. And that's one thing that even I had another interview for a podcast the other day. And this mom, it was also a mom, asking me about my infertility journey and asking me, do you mind sharing? And I'm an open book for this reason specifically. People tend to be scared of talking about things. And I even was like, I remember when my kids were born, I didn't want to share pictures of them in NICU, which is fine. You don't have to. But it was like, I didn't want to admit, like, yeah, they had to stay in the hospital. Like, and I understand that feeling, obviously, because I felt it. But now looking back, it's a silly feeling. Like, why would, people judge me because my kids had to stay in the hospital, or judge me because, I failed somehow, that I couldn't bring them home immediately, or I failed because my son ended up having a lung condition. And that's not true at all,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about, this need, I feel like most women have, and especially as moms, of having control of situations, when in reality, as soon as you get pregnant, you realize I've lost control. I don't have control of over this little person or what's going to happen to them. I only have control of myself and what my reactions and how I'm going to deal with this new person and this new situation in my life. And so that's why I love sharing anything about my story, because I feel like that can help lots of women that are struggling in silence. Moms usually struggle in silence. And, my mission is to, like I said, empower women to believe in themselves, believe in their power, and not be afraid to admit that they're struggling and talk to someone and let this out. Because when you internalize all of these things, it can only cause you harm and in turn your family, right? Because we, as moms, we want to give the world to our families and to our kids, but we don't realize that by not paying closer attention to our thoughts, our feelings, and ourselves, we're really harming the ones that we love the most, right? So I'm an open book.
No, that's perfect. And I loved what you said about not suffering in silence, because I think that too often moms are going through hard things and they're dealing with traumas from the past. They're dealing with balancing parenting and work and all of the other myriad of things on our list,
Yes.
and they're trying to do it all on their own.
Yes.
Maybe some might have a support system, but many don't.
Right. That's true.
And so this idea of suffering in silence, if someone can actually just get a message today, I hope that the message that they get from us talking is that it's important to no longer suffer in silence.
Yes. I love that.
Reach out, talk to someone. And so that's what I've been realizing recently. The idea that there are people out there who are equipped to help people through. There are coaches, there are counselors, there are mentors, there are psychotherapists. There are so many people out there who are equipped to help moms walk through their journey. And this lie we tell ourselves that we, again, as you said, have to be in control. Mm-hmm. Right? We have to be in control, and we have to have it all figured out, and we have to do it all on our own, and we have to suffer in silence.
Right.
No longer.
No. And it's all, I think, a combination of fear and of pride too, like wanting to admit that I can't handle it. And I feel like it's actually the opposite. Being able to recognize when you're struggling is the biggest victory in the world, mm-hmm. and saying it and sharing it, because you're going to be helping yourself and helping others. Usually, when they see you stepping out and, getting out of your comfort zone. And so that's what I've been realizing. And that's what I've been doing with the work that I've been doing, with helping moms and encouraging moms is that understanding that you have to let go of the fear of judgment, mm-hmm. right? What others are going to say, which has a lot to do with pride and not, admitting that you're not perfect, and no one is anyway. So
yeah, that's a struggle for sure. Because I know that I am a recovering perfectionist, so I totally get that struggle.
Yeah, it's tough.
So tell me about what brings you joy about each of your kids individually.
I love that, because I've been, for the longest time, wanting to do like a yearbook for all of them, like because we take so many pictures with like our phones right now. We usually don't develop them anymore. And so like, what do you do with them besides post on social media? I wanted to do like a photo book, and I saw a mom that actually did like picture frames talking about, for each year after every birthday, their favorite tastes, their favorite things, like what are their favorite things right now. We usually do that monthly when the kid's growing. But after they hit a year, it's like everything's out the window. Let's just, let's just survive or whatever. Like, or even like before they turn 1, I remember it was a struggle to even take pictures with them, like with the little stickers on their chest, because they're mobile and all of that. So, it's intense and it's hard to keep up with all the things that I want to do. But I actually wrote down things like what's their favorite toy, what's their favorite TV show, what's their favorite book or whatever, just so I can actually sit down and think about them individually, because that's a real struggle for a mom of multiples, is not seeing them as a group, really hard. And that's something that you really have to be intentional about, because even when I'm like at the pediatrician and they're talking specifically about one kid, it's hard for me not to say the word they, because it's like I see them as a group most of the time. Like, so is he eating his fruits and veggies? And I'm like, well, they, you know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to be like, okay, which one does what? But okay, let me answer your question. So let's start with Sammy. So he has a lung condition, but as I said, he has been surprising us with his mischievousness lately. He's the quietest one. He's not loud at all. And that was one of the reasons why we actually sought help for like speech therapy, because we were concerned, with being bilingual, being premature, having a lung condition, and there are so many free services out there. So I sought help, and I have a speech therapist come to the house once a week. But he's been developing with his language. He's just very quiet. He's quiet and observant, which is something that my husband is. He's he's very talkative and social as well, but he observes a lot. And in comparison to the other ones, that really stands out. And the fact that, he has the oxygen and all of that, but he just, sits there and he's very content on his own. He plays by himself, but he's very loving as well. It surprised me lately, like how he will reach his arms out and want me to go and kiss him, or he will, pucker his lips because he wants to kiss me, even though he doesn't say it. Like, he does the gestures because he's so quiet. And I just love that. Like, he's so, so loving. He just loves hugs and kisses. So that's amazing. And he's very active. He likes to climb. We always say he's going to be involved in some kind of sports for sure, because he's very active. So that's one thing, like, he has the oxygen, but that doesn't debilitate him at all. He runs around, he climbs, he just, and that's one thing. One trouble that I've been having lately going out in public with them is that he's the one that runs away and doesn't listen to me. And it's like, oh my gosh, you would never imagine, you know what I mean? My parents actually were here visiting from Brazil last week. And my dad said, the oxygen doesn't really keep him from doing things, right? I mean, he's just nonstop. And it is true. So yeah, he's very surprising in that sense. And then Benny, he's like my surprise child, because when I envisioned getting pregnant, I always am, you think of names. So it's like, if it's a boy, it's going to be Samuel. If it's a girl, it's going to be Gloria. And then I had this other boy that I had to, think about, envision in my head, while I was pregnant. And so I didn't really know what he would turn out to be, because I didn't plan him necessarily, And so he is actually the most similar to me in my family. Looks a lot like my dad. When he was little, he looked exactly like my sister, like baby pictures. He looks a lot like both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side. And he's very sensitive. He will, react and like to things more so than the others will. Like, it's harder for him to snap out of things. And I feel like that is very similar to me, like, crying and not being afraid of voicing what's going on with him, as opposed to Samuel. And he's also very musical, which I am too. So wow. I grew up singing and in church and playing the piano, and it just amazes me how he will start humming songs and singing the lyrics to songs out of the blue. And it's just, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I can't understand which song it is. And he's like, and he keeps singing it to me, like with his eyes wide open, like, sing with me. Do you understand what I'm singing? And I'm like, oh no, I don't know which song that is. But it's just the cutest thing how musical he is. It's really fascinating because it really stands out compared to the others, how he will all of a sudden start singing a song, or if he will see something that reminds him of a song, he will start singing it, like for an animal or whatever, the kid songs. I love that. And then finally, Gloria, she is super sassy, super girly girl. But at the same time, I feel like growing up with the boys, she has this more tomboyish side of her, which is really like interesting to see her growing up, because you'd think, growing up with boys, she's just going to be kind of like them, learning to kick and, fend for herself. But at the same time, she's very girly and she's very bossy. She's tiny little thing. But she copies me with everything, like pointing her finger and telling the boys out and stuff. And yeah, I know she will help me with discipline and telling on them for sure. But yeah, she's just a firecracker. And it kind of reminds of myself in a way, but she has a lot of my husband's family in her too. Like I see a lot of his sister in her too, because she's very loud. And that's another interesting thing about my husband's family, is that his entire family is very artistic, like performers, and his mom's a music teacher. I actually share a birthday with her. Like we have a lot in common, and he's like the odd man out. He's quiet. He's not interested in being, the center of attention. And so she kind of has these two things. And then Samuel is the quiet one. So it's such an interesting mix, especially when they're all born the same day, to see how different they are and how they pull these different personality traits from the different sides.
That's so cool. And so I'm really curious because, as you said, like, they're born on the same day. They have these different personalities, right? Which I think every mom kind of like discovers over time, that they're like, hold on, I'm doing the exact same thing across the board. Why am I getting different results here?
I know.
Right? Yeah. And so what do you think it means to be an intentional and mindful mom in today's day and age, right? Because I think all of us moms are kind of like watching our kids and trying our best. So what does it mean to be an intentional and mindful mom?
I love those two words. And especially, with your work and our chat earlier, this year for my podcast, because that's something that I have been focusing on this year, especially as my kids grow and it gets more challenging. I am trying to be more mindful, be more intentional, and be more present in everything, and not just trying to survive the day. And I feel like that is a huge part of, the definition of being intentional and mindful, is really enjoying the challenges of motherhood, learning from every experience, whether good or bad, not seeing the challenges as failures. Because I feel like, moms, there's all kinds of, hashtag mom fail. And I know some of it, it's funny. It's nice to make fun of yourself and not take yourself too seriously. But on the same hand, it's important not to, be so hard on yourself, and actually know that you're learning at the same time that they are learning. You've never done this before, and they weren't here before. So it's just enjoying the moment. But in order to enjoy the moment and really be present and mindful, is knowing that it's all a learning process. And you wouldn't have known this before. You know what I mean? Like, you had to have been in this situation. And even though you can get, advice from other people and seek help, which you should, no one will ever be on your shoes. No one will ever be you. No one will ever be the mom to that child. It's you, right? So no one can know what you're going through. And that's beautiful. It's tough, but it's beautiful because it's your experience and your journey to live. Mm-hmm. And so it's just understanding that uniqueness and embracing that uniqueness. And actually, in my last podcast episode, I mentioned the Enneagram.
Did you?
I did.
Yay, we're getting information out about it. Woo!
Yeah. And because I actually had my husband take it, and my sister, and like my closest friends. Turns out they're all the same type, and I'm not. And then when I learned, like, I'm attracting these people to me for a reason. And then when I started like comparing the two, because it's just so hard not to compare, I started feeling like, I'm not as cool as these other people, like my type is not like, I seem kind of shallow and superficial. And then because I'm always looking for the silver lining, I reminded myself, but the world needs someone like me.
Mm-hmm.
Like if everyone was like that, it wouldn't be so cool. It wouldn't be so nice. It would be hard. So
okay, so Martha, I'm really, really curious because I'm pretty certain, like I'm 99% certain I know exactly what your type is, but I want you to tell me because we can't type other people, right? That's one of the things we talked about when we were you were interviewing me before. Yeah. So I didn't want to type you, but I wanted you to take the test. So what type are you, Martha?
I am type 3.
Ha, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
What type are you attracting?
Ones, my friend.
Interesting. Huh. Okay. All right. I can't wait for us to just have like our own little conversation about that.
I know, we have to. You're probably going to make me cry again. Every time we talk, you make me cry. You make me deep into my emotions, which is not hard because I'm super emotional and sensitive. But it's just like realizing that, after I had all my friends and my family take it, it's like, and what I just said about, having triplets and helping me be more organized and pay closer attention to detail, because that's something that's lacking with my personality type, has made me realize my strengths so much and, not be so hard on myself, like I was just saying, but at the same time, realize the things that I need to work on that, I'm attracting these people for a reason.
And to be honest, like with you, I know that success is important to you. You work hard at the things that you do, you know? And I know that, I see all of your videos that you're putting out there. I see the podcast. To be honest, half the time I'm like, man, this girl has a lot of energy, right? Because you're like, you show up and you're trying to do your very best. And I see you. I see you. And part of the reason why our conversations have been so rich is because as much as I really want to like encourage you in the successes, I want to see who you are inside, and I want you to develop that person, right? And I think that that's the richness that we get to offer our kids. When we understand who we are as parents, that is what we can offer our kids. Our healing and our wholeness is important to offer our kids.
100%. And that's what I have been discovering. And that's the whole thing that I was talking about earlier, talking to someone, voicing your struggles, because then you're going to understand, why am I feeling the way that I am feeling? We don't ask ourselves these questions. We just feel, or we suppress the feeling because it's like, I can't allow negative emotions, which is true to a certain extent, but you have to dig deep and understand where they're coming from in order to eliminate them.
And to be honest, even when we're feeling those negative emotions, even if we're not actually articulating them, they're still coming out in different ways. So they're coming out somatically. They're coming out in our bodies, right? When we're getting sick all the time, or we're feeling stressed or getting migraines and all of those things, right? So the emotions that we feel, they need to be expressed in some way. And if we don't do it in a healthy way, it will come out. Trust me.
Yeah, it will come out in an unhealthy way for sure.
Yeah, I can talk with you about this stuff forever. You know that. But
2-hour podcast episode.
Right? Okay. So if your kids came across this podcast sometime in the future and they heard their mama's voice, what words of blessings do you have for your babies?
Oh my gosh. See, I told you were going to make me cry again. It's hard to even think about it because, I feel the guilt of trying to do this while raising them sometimes. And I know most moms, especially entrepreneurs, do too. But I know I have to, it's a pull in me and I can't ignore it. And I know I'm doing it for them too, because I want to be a better person for them. I'm not doing this because I want to ignore the fact that they're there. It's quite the opposite. Because sometimes, moms feel guilty pursuing their dreams and their passions because it in their heads, it means that society will look at them and feel like they're not being the best moms that they can be. And so what I would say to them is, everything I do for you because you are me. You are a part of me. And I need to do this, to discover myself and to discover who I am so that I can be my best self for you. And part of being my best self is helping other moms. It might be hard for others to understand that, or even for them at some point, but this is my heart. I need to be in front of other people, telling them that it's okay to feel the way they do, but they don't have to feel that way. There is always an answer. There is always a way, to be better and to really find joy in life. You don't have to just get by. You don't have to just survive. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want to live the most fulfilling life that I can, and I want others to experience this as well, including my kids.
That's beautiful. And so this is going to be our last question. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your heart, right? It's always a pleasure talking to you. The last question is, if you can give some words of advice to any mamas out there who are listening in today, what would you like to share with them?
Well, I think it really goes back to what we said earlier. Don't suffer in silence. Don't try to put up the front that everything is okay. And in the same hand, it's not like, you want to have a pity party every day, telling the world about your struggles. It's just really finding that balance between, I don't have to be unhappy. You know what I mean? Like I can make a change, taking steps to making a change if you're not happy with where you are right now. And it all comes from learning to appreciate what you do have. And that's one thing that I have been working on too, is like sometimes, like I said, it's like as moms, we're trying to survive the present day, but the present day is all we have, right? So you can't just be trying to survive. You have to be living it to its fullest. And if that means talking about your problems so that you're going to feel better, then do it. And it really goes back to the whole thing of being intentional, being mindful. And there are so many things that you can do to reach that point. And I think it begins by externalizing the things that are inside of you so that everything can come out of you. And you can learn more about yourself. And the only way is by talking, by asking yourself questions, by doing this self-reflection, but also having someone prompt you, because it's not easy to do that on your own. And just like we said, there's so many people out there that are talented and gifted to help take that stuff out of you, right? Bring that stuff out of you so that you can learn more. So definitely don't be afraid to know more about yourself, because that's the only way you can improve, right? If you know more about who you are, then you know what's lacking and what's already amazing. And that, gives you more confidence to do the things that you want to do and to raise your kids too.
You've now reached the end of another episode of Village Mama. If you're enjoying it, I would love for you to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes, and also give it a 5-star review on iTunes. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. So until next time, keep treating yourself and others with compassion and grace. Take care.